We're going to talk about AI. So this is the one of the first IT leader summits we've been doing at JFOL. We've done one a while ago, and like it so much that we decided to get it back. So my name is Bert Schrijver. I'm in the NLJUG board, and I'm really happy today that I have a panel of experts from all areas of the industry who are going to share their wisdom and experience with you on the topic of AI connected to software development. Because I suppose that many of you have in some way heard or experienced AI connected to software development in the past year or so. So how many of you have ever heard of ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever? Oh wow, everyone. I'm not surprised. I'm just acting surprised. So these AIs are typically, when we connect them to software development, they're often linked to large language models, right? So a large language model is a type of generative AI that will take vast amounts of training data, for example, all the code in GitHub, or I don't know, Wikipedia, or all the code in your local Git repository. Train on this, make relations, and they're generally pretty good at predicting text. So they're called generative pre-trained transformers. That's why we call it GPT. And these basically are these transformers are trained on, well, if you look at GPT-3 or 4, billions of documents, and in the end they become relatively good at predicting text. But that's what they do. They're good at predicting text. So if you use them in a way of when you're coding, you're typing something and they're basically going to predict based on what they've learned what the next type piece of code is going to be. And obviously there are loads of other applications, but in general most of these tools are LLMs that we see nowadays. So, that being said, let's dive into our panel. So, do you see anything that's not matching the panel, what's on the screen? Yes, where's Simone? Unfortunately, Simone is sick in bed at home. But we're lucky that Hans was able to step up. Hans used to run the NLJUG a while ago, so I'm happy to have Hans here on stage as well. It's now up to the panel to shortly introduce themselves. Please state your name if people don't recognize you from the picture behind you, and what you do in your day job.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Sharat Chander. I'm part of the Java team at Oracle, longtime member of the Java ecosystem and community, and it's an absolute honor to be sitting here with these distinguished panelists.
Hello, my name is Joris Kuipers. I'm CTO for the Schrijver company that we have in Amsterdam. Schrijver is a global organization. I've been doing Java for over 20 years already. Always been active in the community, especially Spring, because I used to work for Spring Source as well. Still hands-on programmer, and in our company, we do custom application development, as I imagine a lot of you are doing as well. We tried to set up an AI lab actually a couple of years ago, probably a bit too early. It didn't work out. I'm happy to be here.
Hello, I'm Markslag, working at ING as technology lead for AI and machine learning, specifically within the domain of customer data. So we have all the data of the Dutch customers there. We do fraud and that kind of activities. Well, we don't do fraud, but we try to we try to detect.
AI makes it really easy to do fraud, right? So
Hi, I'm Chander, if you didn't catch it this morning in the keynote. I'm part of Picnic's tech leadership team, responsible also for our internal tech academy and doing a lot of alignment across the team. So also getting a lot of insights in how teams are currently looking at Gen AI and ML in general. Have a large background in Java as well, over 15 years of development experience there. So that is my background.
Hey, my name is Irene and I work within Rabobank as a tech lead. I'm not a technician, but I used to be a scientist in psychology, and I'm especially interested in the human-technology interaction. So I think that's also a very interesting perspective on this topic.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Hans Bossenbroek. I used to was part of the NLJUG board. I originally founded Luminous in 2002, sold my company last year into a bigger company. I'm now the chairman of the board, and one of my sort of challenges is to explain to investors what AI is about. So that's my thing.
Thank you. So you may ask yourself, why is this an awesome and suitable panel to discuss this topic? Well, I have the answer. because we both have product companies, agencies, we have enterprises, we have regulated companies. So basically, any challenge you may have in your organization with AI, one of those is having this as well, right? So let's start with the first topic, and we can basically, who wants to take the mic can take the mic. If we talk about AI-based tools that help you in software development, which of your companies is using those type of tools, and what are you doing with them?
So I think, as probably also will hold for many other big corporates, within Rabobank, we still have kind of a ban on Gen AI tooling, but we do get exceptions every now and then. And currently we are experimenting within the part of the department that I'm working in with GitHub Copilot. So that's, I have some interesting results for you.
Yeah, I agree with that. From ING, we have the same policy. We are heavily regulated. So it's really important that we know what happens to our data and to the software that we build. So we also have a ban. So it's not even possible to access ChatGPT through the network to your laptop. Yeah, so that's the current state.
I think what's probably true for a lot of us, but in our company, almost everyone is on the waiting list of IntelliJ to get the AI tooling through, because that actually requires access to ChatGPT. We are not going to prohibit that at all, because we're not in a regulated business, and customers typically care about getting working software and not necessarily about where we got that software from or if it's partly generated. Although it is still, I think, a very interesting discussion where we are in terms of copyright, both of stuff that you send as well as that you use that is produced by AI.
Yeah, similar to some of my panelists here, at Oracle, we do have a restrictions in terms of internal use of Gen AI, but that does not mean that there isn't exploration happening, but it has to be done in a very controlled manner. So
you
it's
mean
done
secret or?
more of, it's an interesting topic that we're talking about Gen AI, because it is the new shiny thing. We are all gravitating toward it. We see it used so often, and we as developers view the new shiny thing as gravity. It pulls us in, and we instantly start thinking that innovation has value. But in that exploration, we also have to understand what is the value and what is the potential harm that it can do. And we have a fundamental responsibility as developers, all of us, that whatever it is that we create is going to minimize the hurt and maximize the value. And so this has to be done thoughtfully. I'm both excited, but I'm also scared at the pace that we're moving to start using it before we've actually established where are the guardrails. We don't know that yet. This is, as we say in the US, the wild, wild west. We need to codify this. We talked about trademarks. We talked about potentially flooding systems with false information that then gets established as truth. These are dimensions that we have a fundamental responsibility to think about before we put anything into production. I will say this, at Oracle, Gen AI is very interesting to us because it's not just about Gen AI, it's the infrastructure that enables that. And so as a solutions company, these are all of the facets that we are also thinking about such that it can provide a unique solution in a helpful, not harmful way.
And so what I like is that lots of topics that you slightly touched are aligned with the next question I'm going to ask, so that's fine. Before I let you reply, Sander, I have a question to you. So far, half of the panel has answered my question to which tools are you using. We're not allowed. So for how many of you is this the case as well? Who's not allowed to use Gen AI tools in their work? Okay. And for how many of you is just like use whatever you use, ChatGPT, Copilot, whatever, just go ahead. Okay, interesting. So of the people who raised their hands that you're not allowed, how many of you are working in a regulated environment like finance or something? Or okay. And of the people who raise their hand, they're not allowed, how many of you are not working in a regulated environment? Yeah, so we see a link there, right? So regulations may prevent you on, taking steps here. So how about Picnic, Sander?
Yes, so also not a regulated industry in that sense. So we do use coding assistance tools, AI tools within Picnic as well. We actually run an experiment both with Copilots and with Codium, which is another tool. We are very mindful that we only choose options where we can opt out of, let's say, the telemetry around this, and also where the model does not incorporate your own submissions, etc. So that's just, I would say, basic hygiene if you look at these kind of tools. But other than that, we do use that. It's not 100% adoption, I would say. It's really something that is sort of grassroots coming up, and people who are interested in this can use it. So it's not as if you should or must use it, but it's definitely a possibility at Picnic.
So probably many of the people who raise their hands here who cannot use generative AI tools in their work are thinking, what's the cheat code here, right? So how do you, well, basically, if you're in a regulated industry, get your company to allow you to use those tools? Did any of you solve that puzzle? Or have ideas on how to?
I think the solution will be, what you are currently seeing is that the big vendors of AI models like Google and OpenAI, they are creating environments that are really, let's say, shielded from the outside world, where all your data and your code will stay. Of course, data and software will flow through the model, because otherwise you cannot do any code completion or prompting. But I think that's the way ahead. And also, I think one of the things is what we, and I think Rabobank as well, has where is the data stored. So it's mandatory for us to store it in Europe. The models are currently running in the United States, so that's also needs to be solved, and it will be solved, I think, because it's moving quite fast. But I think so that's the way ahead, and I think you can read it everywhere that those companies are working on these kind of solutions, not only for regulated finance, for example, but also for other corporates that are also doubting if they can do this.
Any other cheat codes?
Yeah, I think there's another answer here as well, which is maybe a bit longer out, but currently we're talking about integrating with these external services, etc. But there's also very huge development going on in the open models, right? And these are not as accurate yet, but I'm confident that they will get close. And as our industry will also move to more, let's say, hardware enablement, also being able to run this just locally on your machine. I think that is ultimately also a future that we're looking at. Currently not practical, but if we look 2-3 years out, I'm quite confident that that will also be a very feasible option.
Yes, I agree. If you look at open source models like StarCoder, for example, as a nice example for here. They also have a StarCoder chat. I think those are open source models that also are progressing quite fast and have the potential to run on-prem. But I think it's also with the discussion if you want to have your own data center with stuff or go to the cloud. A lot of banks like us is also looking at public cloud. And I think that will also be a discussion. If you really want to run open source models on-prem or maybe in the cloud, also possible, or use the vendor-supplied models.
You know, I'd like to get into what Sharat said. The thing I missed is actually let's say, the strategic framework. So what problem are you actually solving here? I mean, just cast your mind back a couple of years and we were all diddling around with blockchain. Just another fad we had. And we had all these blockchain projects and blockchain labs. So I think it also points at the point that we as a business don't know how to experiment. And the other thing is we're all nerds, so we love to experiment at scale. And as long as we don't understand what the strategic framework is and also what the impact is and the reasoning behind bringing AI to the market, because none of these tech companies do it for free. So this is in my mind, yet another play. So let's take a couple of steps back. Even the word AI is a wrong word. There's nothing intelligent about this. So this is far more a play again about your data. So you have to understand what data is about. You have to understand your strategic impetus on the long term. And then you need to understand what the role of AI can be. And this, my dear friends, is not a tech discussion. It's far more a strategic discussion, which is I'm continuously involved in the work I'm doing. And the majority of the boards just doesn't get an explanation what it's about. The only thing we do is everyone does it, so let's do it as well. I think that's where we need to get away from.
Yeah, I really agree. It's also about what do you want to achieve with this, how can you experiment, but specifically for this case, it's sometimes very hard to come up with some success criteria. And therefore, within Rabobank, we did some exploratory research, and it was really fun to see some talks today about developer productivity, because some managers may feel like, oh, GitHub Copilot says, for instance, that productivity will increase by a rate of 55%. So that's really nice, because then we can cut costs. Well, it's not about that, obviously, hopefully for most people who are sitting here. But it is really about its new tooling. We have some ideas what we want to achieve with it, but we should really explore, and we shouldn't explore as managers, but we should, of course, explore with the developers and not look only at productivity, because, of course, it depends. But what I've seen today in the productivity talks, and it's really confirming what we see within our GitHub Copilot pilot, is that it is not about productivity itself, but it is about the difference between the more boring repetitive tasks and opportunity for more deep brain thinking. And deep brain thinking is intelligent, and you need people for that, and not AI tooling. So, yeah.
So far you've mainly agreed with each other, which is, well, it's more exciting if you disagree, right? So I'm just for the sake of argument, I'm going to at least partly disagree with what Hans said. So you said, well, we had blockchain before, and obviously, well, most of you well, probably boring, agree with me that blockchain was basically a solution looking for a problem, right? And we haven't really found a problem yet. It was just, well, cool technology, jump on it, how we're going to use it, we don't know yet. I think with AI, we may already be a step further. There are practical solutions on generative AI tools as well that I think most of them indeed focus on productivity, because that's where we're getting at, right? And then the question is, well, large language models tend to hallucinate a lot as well, right? So if you ask ChatGPT stuff about, I don't know, yourself, then probably it's going to make up all random facts about yourself. And the nice thing is that it's really confident about this. And that's not much different from people, right? Loads of people are really confident in saying the wrong thing as well. So in that part is mainly human, but it's also, there is a responsibility for anyone who uses those tools to figure out whether they're right, or they suggest the right thing or not. And I think they're only making you more productive if it's also easy to figure out whether it's helping you with the right thing or not. We'll get to that in a bit. I want to get back a bit to the point of regulation, because regulation was something that you know, lots of us are struggling with. The reasons, I think, are mostly because of well, security and or intellectual property, right? If I run this tool on my code base or whatever, my code or my access keys or my configuration will get sent to a remote server or whatever, or it will leak my intellectual property, because if it trains now on my code base, where I have exclusive code that nobody else in the world has that's special, maybe it will generate that code for the next user in my competitor. So have any of you found ways to address this in the way you're currently working with AI-based tools?
We're not working with AI-based tools, so.
Yeah,
obviously, we have the run stuff local in a box in your data center, right? But I don't think we're there yet for.
No, so as I mentioned before, we only run experiments with tools where we can opt out from actually feeding back into the model. So that's just a knockout criterion for us. At the same time, I also want to make a difference between code and data, right? So on the one hand, all these tools that we talk about, they work at the code level. If you talk about ChatGPT and just also non-developers using these tools, it's much more about pasting in whatever you have in your systems, etc. And there we are indeed quite strict. We say, okay, we don't want any customer data, any kind of internal data to be pasted or used into ChatGPT. So use it as a brainstorming tool, use it as a verification tool, use it for inspiration, etc. But don't use it to, let's say, paste in a list of customer data and have it infer some kind of property or whatever. That is just currently not something that we are comfortable with. So.
It's something to disagree with. I think AI in general is dangerous for all plagiarism. So every job that's based on plagiarism, which is, I think, for a lot of bad programs, actually what they do, because they just copy and hope it works on my machine and then it's finished. And I think we should be able to address that problem and not solve that with AI. And I think a lot of jobs in the current society are based on plagiarism. Look, for instance, at lawyers and notaries and accountants. That's what they do, right? So it would be good if we take a step back and understand the problem we're trying to solve. That would be my main gist of thinking about AI.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a fundamental challenge just in the term itself. If we continue to use the acronym AI so loosely and lose sight of what those two words combined mean. Artificial intelligence. So where is the innovation? If the system is designed to take information from what exists out there, that's already something that's been solved. So are we creating any net new innovation? We haven't figured that out yet. We don't know what that may end up resulting in. I would like to go back to one point, and I think a few of my panelists have covered this, is it's the structure that we work within. Is that experimentation controlled or uncontrolled? Because we've seen in history what uncontrolled experimentation can do. So where are the barriers and where are the boundaries? And how wide or how narrow are them? And are we going to jump those barriers? Is there a need to do that? Those are philosophical questions that we must first have before we put things into production. Because once things are in production and once we start using it, we lose sight of the harm. I can give an example that we've all been living through for the last 10 plus years. Social media. Social media was yet another one of those buzzwords and terms. It was supposed to solve the ability to allow us to connect easily, share information, to collaborate, to have discussion. And unfortunately, if you look at the world of social media right now, the term in itself is false. It's created an unsocial environment. It's created hostility. It's created conflict. It's created hurt. It's created risk. It's put lives at stake. So where is this technology going to take us? Like I said, AI, does it have a place? Yes, technology evolves, as it should, but it has to be done thoughtfully. And I'm not sure where the right establishment is for the boundaries. And I know we like to say we need to keep government small, but in some ways, this needs some level of guidance, codification, maybe even regulation. I'm not saying we go that far yet, but before we make something so mainstream that we're now just consuming it without understanding the harm, we then accept the harm as a norm. And that's the thing that I hope we don't see, is where harm is normalized.
I think it's also interesting, and I see the same thing here, that very often when developers or people like us in the development space talk about AI, we're talking about developer productivity. How can we make this, use this stuff to make our lives easier and better, produce code? As a CTO of a company that produces software for other companies, because we're not ourselves a product company, for me, actually, I think it's more interesting to think about what AI will mean and how we will apply it, and with both in terms of having boundaries, but also in having new opportunities. When it comes to putting it in products, for example, in typical enterprise systems, one thing that I'm very excited about is the stuff like, if you have looked at AI already, or LLMs especially, retrieval augmented generation, where you can actually have your own data or your customers' data stored in vector databases, pass that to a generic model, like a trained LLM model, which could be open online, ChatGPT could be offline, but then actually reason about your own data. And I think a lot of the discussions in what I'm missing is how will these opportunities evolve? A lot of people are so focused on, I have all of these junior developers and they need to be productive quickly, so we'll just put a co-pilot into their tool and now they can write code. And I think everything that is involved with that is not really that different from how we're currently working. It means they need to be coached, it means someone needs to review their code, we need to have tests in place, all of that stuff needs to be there. From a legal point of view, obviously, it's very disputable where all of these models come from with their data. It's very often like GitHub private repos, no one has ever consented to actually making this code public. But all of that is just the AI part related to building and developing application code. And I think the discussion and also the opportunities actually are way broader than just having a better Stack Overflow, because that's very often how I look at it.
And what I like to see, what I like is that we are emerging like two tracks. Right? One is the more overall strategic track. We have a new type of technology. What are we going to do with this? Basically what Hans mentioned, right? And second is, well, most of us here probably have some affinity with software development. The more applied track, we have those tools based on the technology now. How can they help them? So I'd like to circle back first to the first point. Well, we see that there's amazing new technology and applications emerging. How, as a company, are you going to find out or make a strategy or make, I don't know, a vision or policy on whether or not and how to use those technical possibilities? Does any of you have any thoughts on how companies should approach this?
You know the story about the computer Eliza and the inventor? You read the book on how it all went wrong and how he predicted. Yeah, exactly. So my point is, these questions are all irrelevant. We need to understand what we're trying to achieve here. There's a lot of research going on now in terms of the inherent convergent nature of AI. So what it takes away is serendipity, and it takes away creativity. So what it does, it will create all kinds of the same solution. So we could use it for very small point problems, but the question is whether the embedded cost and the human effort is actually worth the investment. Whereas we need to understand, and that was where also Eliza went wrong, because he predicted what's happening, and it actually surprised him how fast it happened, because the secretary went in a couple of days completely off track. And that's the point with AI, and the same with blockchain. We need to understand differently in terms of what framework we are trying to do this. And I think as long as we keep procrastinating with trying new technologies, we miss the point.
I also think we don't really appreciate that we're in a pretty unique time period with respect to Gen AI. And what I mean by that is we're using these tools, they look amazing, right? And the assumption is it will only get better. However, there's this issue, and you were already seeing this with Amazon being flooded by books created by ChatGPT and all this kind of stuff. Up till now, these models are all trained on, let's say, human input, right? But what will happen in a few years from now when we're flooded with all this content that has been generated by these AIs, and this will also be incorporated into the model because it's very hard to actually distinguish this output from actual human efforts. And this convergence is actually a pretty bleak outlook indeed, where you actually create an echo chamber, and that is something that I think the assumption it will only get better from now is clearly not proven.
Indeed, you get a model collapse. Yeah? So, but coming back to your question, so because I think we need to talk, of course, about ethics, copyright, all that kind of stuff. It's really important. But I think as a company, we have a responsibility there. But the greater good we cannot solve. So we're relying on the governments like the EU with the AI Act that's coming. So hopefully that will set something in place that regulates how we're going to use this technology. But I think, back to your question, I think the bottom line is it's great technology for us to use, like the coding assistants, and we will start using them even in a regulated environment when, let's say, the practical and the risk stuff is solved, and then we will just have another or a couple of great tools that we can use to do our work, and then you get like the interesting discussions that engineers, that somebody said programmers stop calling themselves engineers, and now maybe with the new tooling we will be more engineers than programmers because a lot of that work can be done by a coding assistant. And I also think that if you look at the speed that the technology is evolving, so now if you use, I use it at home of course, if you use Copilot, then it's a great tool. You can code faster, you can chat a little bit, even though ChatGPT is much powerful at the moment. But let's say 5 years in the future, I think it will be. I think we cannot imagine what we will have in 5 years. If you look at the coding assistants, maybe you know the movie Minority Report. Where does anybody know the movie? Okay. So you have like the pre-crime department. I'm not going to talk about pre-crime, but if you look at Tom Cruise, he's talking to something like, let's say, a model which visualize everything on screens. I visualize something like that, that you can talk to the model. I want to have this and model it like that and generate the code like this. And I think it sounds maybe a little bit futuristic, but I think this will happen, and then it will be a great tool.
Yes, we're disagreeing. We're going in the right direction. Go ahead.
Do you know that Microsoft is currently opting for a license for a small nuclear reactor to drive their cloud centers for AI training? So you're really talking about a tool that's based on nuclear technology with all nuclear waste to improve developer performance. That's your story? Don't you think it's a bit strange? I mean, we're working with things we can't oversee. By the way, it's not intelligence, it's fucking stupid algorithms. that are trained with data we can't control, and then we hope that we get a few percent better in terms of developer performance. I'd say we need to step back and say, okay, how do we build systems? Let's go for it. There are all kinds of technologies that are way better than just any third generation language. But apparently we're so stuck in our ways that we believe sort of, okay, as long as I can control innovation, then we can use technology to make a small step forward, and we do that at all cost. And I think that's just a wrong choice.
But don't you think that's twofold? So on one hand, you have like the more regular repetitive task without the, without the chance to do anything harmful in the future, versus the more deep creative thinking that we should still do as humans. So I think you're hinting towards like the twofold kind of principle, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so the solving the repetitive thing and also stepping away from being a programmer to becoming an engineer and really designing systems. So the discussions we used to have in the NLJUG sometimes was how many people actually design a system or design and write an architecture. So many people believe in agile sort of, I don't have a needed conscience anymore. I just start programming in the morning, and if I really have my time, I'll do it with a friend, and I have to call it pair programming. And after Corona, we could do it at home, which is not what our job is about. So I think we need to step back a bit and say, what's our job and how do we optimize our job?
I have a question for you. Because if you look at, for example, ChatGPT and how this works on schools, there's teachers, they are afraid that kids get dumber because they are using too much tools and don't have creative thinking or critical thinking. But what do you see? Let's say we have a future where we have those tools, and we as software engineers, we use those tools in our work. So what do you think from that perspective? Will we be dumber or smarter, or what will happen?
So I assume that you're taking all the costs and all the risks involved in using these tools for a few percent.
No, we're not talking about sustainability.
No. Apparently, so that's not your responsibility anymore. That's just. So, no, okay. So first, the education part. You know, the product that was most hit by AI in ChatGPT. It was an international company. They did plagiarism control for handed-in work, and that's the level we are in current education. So we believe still. Education is one of my favorite topics. Sander knows. We believe education is a sort of a mass production, industry-oriented process. We push children through it. So it's interesting to see that actually, even without AI, we teach children out of creativity. So there's a lot of research going on in terms of children in elementary schools are more creative than children in secondary schools. Another thing, we did a lot of workshops for young children in education. You know that at the end of elementary school, about 50-50 boys and girls went to these technology workshops. And if we do the same workshop at the end of secondary education, it's like 90%, 10%. So we also teach women out of technology. So if we talk about a diverse society and about a real different way of learning, I think AI is the least of our problems.
In terms of education, in my role, I also speak to a lot of applicants who apply at Picnic, and increasingly I hear when I ask, okay, how do you go about learning a new technology? The answer used to be, I do a Coursera course, or I do tutorials, I build something myself. Increasingly, the answer becomes, I go to ChatGPT and just have a session and try to understand, which on face value sounds great, right? A big win, because it will be very tailored to your questions and to your sort of experience already. At the same time, this also goes back to the model collapse that we talked about. What is the incentive to actually create new content, right? What is the incentive to actually create the work that goes into those models that actually helps those people? And I think that is a big question that is completely unanswered at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. It's the. I think there was an article on that the web is dying again because of that. For the zoveelste keer. Yeah. Maybe once because you already mentioned sustainability. I think it's great technology, but I agree. Yeah. So if you look at the energy consumption of those models, it's crazy. And if you don't solve that, then because I think we also have as banks a responsibility on that. So that also needs to be solved before you can really use it on a large scale.
The framework, we can't balance the risks. That's the point.
I think one thing interesting here, this is something that actually got me thinking recently, is that more and more people indeed learn to program, learn to develop using these tools that are by definition trained on existing code bases. I think actually for a language like Java that has been around for over 2 decades already, this is actually great news.
28 years.
Yeah, exactly. Although I'm not sure how much Java 1.0 there still is in the training model data for ChatGPT. But one thing that I think this might actually hinder is innovation at the abstraction level in which we work ourselves. Because typically I think a lot of what we've seen over the last decades of why people are becoming more productive is because we write at a higher level, right? We don't write assembly code anymore. We don't have to deal with memory management. There is additional stuff being handled by what we have already. But if everyone is just producing solutions by definition, using what's already out there that has been in a model that's already 2 years behind the current state of affairs, and this is how we all build software, then who's going to do the innovation to actually make sure that this stuff still happens?
This is such a broad topic. I'm sure we're not going to have enough time. We could talk for, I think, the next several days on this, but some of the themes we've been talking about just continue to demonstrate that this needs to be thoughtfully explored. It absolutely has to be. And there's some parallels here. So I'm all for accelerating learning. That's important because that allows you to get to a solution much faster. It's interesting because I tutor at my daughter's high school in math. And we won't talk about how bad the math curricula in the US is. We can have another discussion on that. But when I'm tutoring the children, they can't function without their scientific calculator. They know how to press the buttons, but they don't know why they're pressing the buttons and what return it's supposed to provide in terms of the answer. If you don't have that foundational understanding of mathematics, the calculator is useless. And that's what I look at LLMs and ChatGPT. It's a tool. It may not have applicability everywhere. We have to understand where it has use and where it has value and where it should not be used specifically. And that's what we're fundamentally in this sort of exploration phase. And so I hope we can collectively as developers, and again, we've talked about this, we get attracted to innovation, to new ideas, to the cutting edge. It is cool, but what potential harm is there? In the opening keynote, I flashed the quote, move fast and break things. And that goes against every fiber of what I was taught as a child. My father's quote is, move thoughtfully and build things. And I think if we move thoughtfully with Gen AI, there is opportunity in specific use cases, but it doesn't solve everything. And business leaders need to understand that. I've talked to many CEOs who continue to ask, where do I get that Gen AI solution? Sign me up. Do you have a SKU for that? Do you sell that? And I sit there going, what are you asking? You don't fundamentally even understand what it is that it can do. You just see the shiny thing that my company has to jump on because if I'm not doing it, my competitors are. And so we need business leaders to think thoughtfully.
So we basically figured out there were 2 tracks that we're talking about, right? We're now mainly in the strategic responsibility, societal impact track, the future. The other track is what can we do with those tools now? How many of you are interested in further exploring like the more overall strategic track that we're now at? How many of you want to dive into what can we do with those tools today?
Shiny new.
Well, so let's. I think both topics are equally interesting. Let's wrap up this.
Or who's not sure?
Oh, sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's the rest. But then we don't know where to go anyway, right? So I think we need to wrap up with. We need to be this topic with. We need to be aware that also us as developers and technology leaders have a responsibility to think about applications of new technology and basically the impact and the ramifications. Like throwing 10,000 servers to train a little model that helps me be 1 minute faster as a developer per day, is it really worth it? The environmental impact, the money I put in there, etc. Or is it just about using a new shiny thing, right? So I think we all have a responsibility there to make sure that these tools are used for good. And good is not only like making money, but having a positive impact on society, and also thinking about the environmental implications of running huge AI models, especially the training of those. So then we have about 10 minutes left. Let's circle back a bit to down to earth and today. There are things that are preventing us from using generative AI tools in software development, right? So regulated environments are one. Another question I have is licensing. So if I'm using Copilot to write code, it generates some code. Who owns this code? Is it my code? Does I don't know OpenAI or GitHub own the code? Is it copyrighted or not? Yeah, if ChatGPT generates something, right? Does I don't know? Does OpenAI own what's generated or not? Has any of you any ideas or thoughts on this? I don't know the answer.
Yeah, I think as you also said, we have some. So one of my colleagues, he did everything to do some like 10,000 extra risk processes, of course. And we made some very strict agreement that we don't share any of the code. So we have some very strict environment, but I'm not the expert on that topic. So, but I know that we did like all the risk mitigations that we should have done. So it's a bit boring, sorry.
As excited as I am bloody scared out of my mind. Because as we develop Gen AI solutions, the question also has to be, what is it consuming? If it's consuming copyrighted information, what liability am I now under? If I sell a solution to a customer, what does that SLA guarantee? Am I putting my IP at harm? Am I enabling my competitors with something that's important for my business? And I don't know. I don't know. So fundamentally, how are these systems being designed to minimize that impact? That's what it fundamentally comes down to. And Hans said that. What is the underlying architecture such that there's stability there, there's standardization there, and there's not impropriety there?
I think one of the problems there is that, in order to investigate legal implications of something, you need somebody who's good at legal stuff, right? And then
I'm at Oracle. We're great.
yeah, and then the question from the legal people goes to the developers, like, okay, so what does the technology mean? And then if we have trouble explaining this,
I'm also not sure that this is a new problem. People are thinking that this is something that all of a sudden we now need to deal with. I seriously doubt that there are many people here that know that all of the code that their developers are producing is 100% creative, thought of by these developers. This is not how most people work in practice already. People do go out on Stack Overflow. There are plenty of solutions out there who just copy-paste code, seems to run, let's put it in production. I'm not saying that this is a good thing, obviously, but this is not a new problem in that sense. And the same is true for every code that you get from somewhere. You didn't invent it yourself. Who did? And is there an author? So I'm not so sure that this is that interesting from that point of view, because I don't think it's really that new of a problem that we have. This is something that we should already be thinking about and dealing with. And it depends a lot on your industry, if it even matters as well, because I honestly think that a lot of developers overestimate, and not just developers, but also the business owners, like, yeah, of course, our code is super unique because it is what gives us our competitive edge, and it's unique for the world, and there is smart secrets in there that no one else can guess, where in practice, a lot of the work that we do isn't really that different from what all of the competitors are doing as well. And it's not your unique software algorithm that someone is copy-pasting accidentally in a tool that will lose that competitive edge, I think. So I think also very often these things are either not new problems, or they're overrated.
I think what's happening right now, I think Microsoft has already set out that they will absorb any legal stuff on GitHub Copilot. So let's say I'm sued because I'm using some software from the model, and then I sell the software and somebody sees it and says, yeah, but that's from them. And I think this is already happening. But I think the solution will be at the government again, where they put some legislation in place, what is allowed for training models and what is not. And and if that doesn't happen, then you'll get lawsuits all over the place, like it's happening now.
One thing to remember too is, as innovation happens, it's great to see that excitement, and we sometimes lose sight of that harm. It doesn't become real until it impacts you. So what risk are you going to experience? Is it your company or is it you? Or for that matter, your information? Like, I unfortunately had my identity stolen back in 2017. Didn't know where the penetration was, and it took me years to recover. It's kind of scary to think there's a second Shar in the world. There's one is enough. But you know, what are these systems going to do? And until you feel that impact, that negativity firsthand, we don't think about the consequences. We just don't. That's fundamentally how we are as humans.
Way back in the early 2000s, when we were still talking about the initial generations of Java, we were going all out in terms of query optimizers and how it works. So the question is, do we really understand how these things work? We don't. I mean, environments like OpenAI have more than 1 billion parameters. And by the way, not all are accessible to the public. So one of the main questions I wrestle with is, why do these companies push this thing forward? They don't do it for free. They're not interested in the better world. They're not. They're definitely not. And excuse me, but it's a US tech game, and we fail to see what the impact is. And as long as we push this responsibility away from us, and also don't force them to be transparent, I don't think we should go and try it for free, because that's where the real problem lies. Which means I think there's, in terms of machine learning and all kinds of old school AI, there's a lot of value. Let's first explore that, and let's forget these public machines that are made out to roll over society. And I think we as customers of this technology should also be aware of our role as a customer. So every time we are using this modern technology, we should ask ourselves, what problem am I solving here? And what's the impact of this solution?
Yeah, I think, I don't remember who said it. It was about social media, but I guess the same applies to what you were saying. If the product is free, you are the product. So you're the product to the company is providing the service, right? So we have a couple of minutes left. I'm curious to hear if there's any questions you'd like to ask our panelists. There's one hand there. Can you get me the mic and I'll run around?
Yes, hello. I have a question. I didn't hear anything about contribution, so you're the consumer, but not maybe not contributing, because most models are created on open source software, and you're using that, but maybe you're not contributing back. So what are your views on that? Because you also have, on internet, you have lots of memes, right, where you have this big structure and this really small open source developer who's maintaining that library, which is really important. So I have a question like, how do you see that going forward? Do you see your company also contributing or only consuming?
Who wants it?
I'll try. All right, no safety net. There is a fundamental discussion between open source and closed source on this. The question is, do companies find value in that shared contributor model? And if they do, then there absolutely should be contributions and participation. If they view that IP as something unique to them, developing closed source models is the capitalistic way. I hate to say that. I don't like it. I think there's better knowledge and innovation that happens collectively. But it fundamentally comes down to each company and each leader in terms of what they're trying to do. I'm an open source advocate. I believe that's one of the highlights of what I've seen in the last 20 years of innovation, especially in Java. The fact that we've opened it up and allowed the ecosystem to participate and contribute. And fundamentally, it'll come down to, do leaders want to take advantage of it? If they're only consuming it, then you are a virus. I'll say that.
Okay, some nuance. I think as ING, we also contribute a lot to open source. We have open source our web component libraries, which you can use to build nice web apps if you want to. But if you look at models, if the question is about if you're going to provide software to train a model or maybe even data, that's out of the question, of course. The software is also really difficult because maybe fraud, coming back to my misjudged joke about fraud, but let's say we would contribute with our fraud software. and somebody asks the model, how has ING implemented their fraud software, and you get the code. So I think that's difficult. So how can you break it? How can you break it? Yeah, that kind of questions. Yeah. So that's, I think, from our perspective, is really difficult to contribute there.
I also think it depends a lot on what companies are doing themselves with this stuff. That boils down again to, are you a consumer or are you producing this stuff? If I look at my own work, we're not going to be a company that produces or trains their own data models for use with AI technology. It just doesn't make sense for what we do. We develop enterprise application software. When we're looking at what we can contribute, it's to adding to projects like LangChain for J, for example, when we're talking about the Java space, where we can contribute to integrating with these systems and make that more easily. I just had my merge request approved last week. It was nice. Because this is very new space for me as well to get into. But I think for us, it's the integration and it's that sort of stuff. Whereas for big companies like the banks that will actually apply this stuff themselves and have their models, it's quite different. But I think I would be very surprised if a lot of us, assuming that we are working as developers more than data analysts, will be doing a lot of work directly related to producing open AI or AI data models, for example. I think it's a different area of work.
I also think it's fundamentally unclear what it means to contribute at this moment, right? Because the companies, they're so untransparent, everything is happening. You have no idea how the blog post that you're writing or the open source library that you're maintaining, how that actually feeds back into the model and what it means. So yes, we will keep on doing the things we believe are right to do. So we do also open source. We write a lot about what we do. And in that sense, likely we're contributing, but it's completely unclear and untransparent how this will end up in these models and what it actually means for others to use.
As we already said, we can talk about this for hours.
Days,
yeah. Well, time-wise, we need to wrap up. So one final question for each of you in maybe one sentence. What's your advice on the topic of AI to this group of people? I'll go first, and mine is keep thinking yourself.
I'd say just imagine in 5 years who the next Sam Bankman-Fried is going to be.
Well, as a psychologist, I would say, again, it depends. So use it, of course, very wisely. And I'm really happy to hear that we have quite some conservative opinions and good intentions with it. But also, as a psychologist, again, I would say your behavior is highly shaped by two things. One of them is the environment, and the second one is the status quo. So be aware of that and create an environment for yourself in which only using Gen AI tooling won't be the status quo.
I think I would go back to what I shared this morning as well. The tools are not the point. It's the way we think about our craft, the way we think about what it is that we do as developers that will set us apart. And do AI tools have a place in that? Most likely yes, but keep thinking for yourself, as Bert says, and I think you will be fine.
Yeah, I would say be practical about it. So I think they're great tools, so try them out. And it's not only about the coding assistance, but it's also about the tools around it, like was mentioned, like LangChain, and more tooling around it. Because yeah, we can argue about the ethics and about everything, but it will come. So it will come with the coding assistance and Gen AI as well. And I think as developers, we play a role to understand technology and also to understand all the stuff around it, like the ethics and risk stuff.
Yeah, I very much agree that I think the only way, this is my general philosophy, not just related to AI, but to have an informed opinion on anything technical, you need to work with it yourself first. So, and I think working with this in this case doesn't just mean try out the built-in integration in your IDE, because then you are just a consumer. What I would advise everyone to do is look at some talks, read some papers, see what this technology actually works like. You don't need to be an AI expert, but just know about the new developments. Play around with this stuff. It's becoming available for Java people nowadays. You don't need to write Python anymore. And this is important for many reasons, but I think one of the most important reasons is to even have an informed opinion, right? How can you talk about where guardrails should be if you don't even know what the road is that we are driving, right? You need to have an opinion on that. So I would advise everyone to check out that first and then make up their own minds.
I guess I'll end with a quote from my father. I quote my father all the time now. And if he was here, he's like, see, Shar, I told you so. When I was growing up, he used to say, and he still tells me to this day, Shar, you know less than you know. And I love that quote because no matter how much I know, there's still so much more to learn. And I think all of the panelists have said it eloquently, which is do thoughtful research and exploration first. That is fundamentally what is needed. You know less than you know.
Thank you. So please give a round for our panelists. We'd love to hear what you thought of this. If you have questions to them, feel free to keep them here, and they'll be happy to talk further, I guess. Please let us know what you thought of the session through the NLJUG app, and enjoy the rest of the event.